You're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are the headlines this evening. In Tunisia, two non-establishment candidates are in the lead as vote counting continues in the first round of a presidential election. We'll bring you the latest on the ground in Tunis. He was acquitted of war crimes charges last January, but the former Ivory Coast president, Laurent Gbagbo, will now face an appeal by the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. We'll talk to France 24's Frank Hersey about the implications. And the remains of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe arrived in his home village on Monday for a farewell ceremony. His funeral will take place next month in the capital, Harare. Thanks for watching Eye on Africa. Now we start in Tunisia, where most of the votes have now been counted in the presidential race. And a former conservative constitutional law professor is for now in the lead. Kais Saied is a few points ahead of media magnate Nabil Karoui. Karoui has been in jail since last month on money laundering and tax evasion charges. The second and final round of voting will take place next month. Now, earlier I spoke to journalist Fadil Aliriza in Tunis, and I started by asking him what the latest results were in that vote count.
The ballot counting is really being rushed to try and keep up with the exit polls that we learned last night, which suggested that Kais Saied and Nabil Karoui would be in the lead. And as of 7:30 p.m. Tonight, so that just about an hour ago, with 71% of the ballots counted, it looks like those numbers are holding up, with Kais Saied quite far ahead, almost 19%, and in second, Nabil Karoui at about 15%. Third is the Islamist candidate Moro at about 13%, which was interesting because Ennahda last night was suggesting, don't jump to conclusions. Our candidate may actually come out on top and go to the second round. But as we're looking at the numbers now, it looks very unlikely statistically that Moro will pull ahead, even though he's only 2% behind. So it looks very likely that we'll see a Saied and Karoui runoff. However, today there has been speculation about whether that'll be the case. Of course, Karoui is facing charges on for related to corruption, and there may be updates on what the prosecution does between now and then that may complicate his ability to run in the second round.
Two outsiders like that leading this first round of the election, it is really a slap in the face for the establishment, isn't it, Fadil?
Yes, I mean, we saw the candidates from the major parties that have been in the governing coalition do rather badly, although the expectations have been quite high. That includes the current prime minister. That includes, of course, the Ennahda candidate from the Islamist party. It also includes the defense minister, who had really taken up the reins of sort of the old guard conservative. And those candidates seem to have come in third, fourth, and fifth, respectively. And pundits today are really asking how they got it wrong. Actually, the polling was quite right consistently, but many of the pundits had really not considered it, and partly because in the case of at least Kais Saied, he had no media coverage whatsoever. He didn't have much of a Facebook presence either. He was going town to town apparently just on shared shuttle taxis to talk with people directly. I spoke to a young man who voted for him, saying that he likes that he's not part of traditional politics, and the fact that he doesn't have a media presence. The young man said he doesn't have a TV, he doesn't watch media anyway. So a lot of people are trying to wonder now whether they were in a sort of a media bubble.
Now, in neighbouring Algeria, the country is set to vote in a presidential election on December the 12th. That announcement was made by the country's interim president in a TV address on Sunday. Now, protesters have criticised the decision, saying the election should be further postponed until more of the ruling elite quit office. The long-standing President Abdelaziz Bouteflika was forced to resign in April after months of demonstrations. But Algerians have continued to protest every week, calling for many of those still in government positions to go. The chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court has said she will appeal the acquittal of Laurent Gbagbo. In January, the former Ivorian president was cleared of war crimes after 7 years of detention in The Hague. The charges date back to the 2011 presidential election, where 3,000 people died in violence that followed the vote. France 24's Frank Hersey is in Abidjan, where he's been talking to Ivorians about what they think of the decision.
The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has lodged an appeal against the acquittal of Laurent Gbagbo, citing what she calls legal and procedural errors during the trial. And as with every stage of this case, today's decision has proved highly divisive here in Abidjan. The political parties which support Gbagbo say they're disappointed, but they're fully confident that he will be acquitted in due course. Though some see this as a conspiracy to make sure that Laurent Gbagbo is kept out of the country for the next elections. Here on the streets in Abidjan, people have been uncharacteristically unwilling to talk about this, while the vast majority believe that the best thing for the country is that he return and reconciliation efforts continue. None of those who agreed with the decision were willing to speak on camera.
If they don't have more proof, they should let him go. They need to let him go for the sake of national reconciliation, so that peace can really come back to Ivory Coast, because we really need it.
It's just another disappointment. It's just one delay after another, and we don't understand any of it anymore. Maybe a political power is behind all of this.
If he's acquitted, then that's that. There's no point in going through it again with charges and everything. Or maybe they just don't trust their own justice system.
There's still a long way to go, as the appeal would have to be accepted by the court, and if accepted, the appeal part itself could last months, making it almost impossible for Laurent Gbagbo to return here for the presidential elections in October 2020.
To Zimbabwe now, where hundreds of doctors have taken to the streets of Harare to protest the alleged abduction of their union leader. Peter Magonbaye had organised a series of strikes over poor pay and working conditions in recent weeks. It is believed he was abducted by the security forces, which the Zimbabwean authorities deny. Now, Monday was the second day in a row that doctors had staged a walkout. Here's one of the leaders of the doctors' unions.
It is actually unfortunate that we ended up coming to this stage whereby we saw a doctor not being able to afford to live in this country. By living, I'm saying a doctor couldn't afford rent, couldn't afford food, couldn't afford transport. We are not talking about clothes, we are not talking about buying cars, we are not talking about anything. Just to survive, just to be able to go to work, we couldn't afford.
Staying in Zimbabwe, the remains of deceased former President Robert Mugabe were taken to his home village on Monday. His final burial is expected to be held in 1 month's time in the capital, Harare. Mugabe, who ruled Zimbabwe for nearly 4 decades, died last week in Singapore at the age of 95. Claire Roche has more.
In Robert Mugabe's home village of Kutama, mourners kneel, bidding farewell to the man who led their country for 37 years. His coffin will spend the night in the village area and is expected to be driven back to the capital, Harare, on Tuesday, according to family sources. The burial arrangements for the former president of Zimbabwe have been mired in a dispute between the Mugabe family and the government. The family, including Mugabe's wife, Grace, initially wanted to lay him to rest in private in his home village. But they eventually agreed to authorities' wishes to bury him at the National Heroes Acre Monument in Harare, after a new mausoleum is built for him there. At a state funeral on Saturday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa praised Mugabe, despite strained ties with the family over the former leader's ouster by the military 2 years ago.
Zimbabwe is mourning the demise of a great son of the soil, a visionary and champion of our empowerment.
Mugabe remains a divisive figure in Zimbabwe. He's hailed by some as the hero who liberated the country from white minority rule in 1980. And he's scorned by others for political repression, corruption, and economic mismanagement.
Next up to Nigeria and their traditional form of boxing. It's known as dambe, and it's not for the light-hearted. The aim of dambe is to knock out your opponent. Now, one company is filming the matches and posting them online, and as a result, the sport's popularity is on the rise. Nicolas Germain reports.
These men get ready for a match of dambe, Nigeria's traditional boxing sport. One hand is protected and is used for fighting, the other is used as a shield. The aim is to knock out your opponent. During important tournaments, fighters can earn up to $900.
I'm very happy with my life. Thanks to this sport, I can buy food and provide for my family. I don't do any other sports apart from traditional dambe boxing.
2 years ago, one company started filming the matches. They edit the videos and send them to subscribers.
The overall goal for us as a company is basically to elevate the sport from these rustic grounds into an internationally recognized sport. For us, it's about building this Dambe Warriors franchise as a sporting asset in Africa. It's like the biggest combat sport in Africa.
The company is in talks to partner with major satellite stations. For the moment, it already has nearly 100,000 subscribers, including viewers in Thailand, Brazil, and the United States.
All right, that's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Do stay tuned.